Welcome back everyone. This is part 62 of the Time Chamber series. You guys have been asking for longer episodes, and in today's episode, I did just that. Hope you enjoy the extra content. With that said, please drop a like as usual, leave a comment, and let's begin.
Cross my heart and hope to die. Welcome to my dark side.
The battlefield was a chaotic war zone, filled with relentless destruction and the ominous churn of dark clouds overhead. Lightning cracked through the sky in rapid, jagged streaks, casting brief flashes of light on the ground below. The very earth trembled under the weight of unimaginable power, forces far beyond what any mortal could comprehend. In the air, suspended like gods of destruction, stood three titanic figures, Broly, Conic, and Abaddon. Their energies collided like mighty ocean waves crashing against one another, sending shockwaves that rippled deep into the planet's core and even far into the reaches of space. Below them, the ground cracked wide open, rivers of molten lava gushing out across the land. Entire cities, once mighty and proud, crumbled into dust in the distance, unable to withstand the sheer force of the battle raging above. Broly's emerald aura flared violently around him, surging like a storm as he fully unleashed his legendary Super Saiyan form. His enormous muscles bulged, veins throbbing with raw energy, while his white glowing eyes were locked onto his opponents. He let out a furious, earth-shaking roar that echoed across the devastated planet. His targets, Conic, the vengeful angel bent on maintaining his divine order, and Abaddon, the ancient demon god whose lust for destruction mirrored Broly's own rage, seemed just as determined to end this battle in their favor. Despite Broly's overwhelming strength, his battle instincts screamed at him, a silent, primal warning. He wasn't the strongest in this fight. Hovering above, Conic appeared like a dark angel of retribution, his glowing halo casting an eerie light around him. His once calm and serene face was twisted with a deep-seated fury, and his entire body was enveloped in divine energy. The death of his comrade, Campari, at the hands of Abaddon had ignited a fierce determination within him, and he was ready to deliver justice. But even as he gathered his power, he couldn't ignore the dangerous presence of Broly. The legendary Saiyan's raw power was a force of nature in itself, untamed and unpredictable. Abaddon floated with a sinister, almost bored indifference, his glowing crimson eyes glinting with sadistic amusement. Dark energy crackled around his blackened armor, and the flashes of lightning revealed his sharp, gleaming teeth as he smiled wickedly. Though he delighted in the chaos, the thrill of clashing with both mortal and angel alike, a small twinge of caution nagged at him. Broly's power, though not godly in the way of deities, was something else entirely. Abaddon had never encountered such raw might in a mortal before, and the thought of it sent a twisted ripple of excitement through him. He couldn't help but grin wider, eager to test the limits of this Saiyan's strength. And then, without warning, all hell broke loose. Broly launched himself forward with the speed of a missile, his enormous frame cutting through the air as his fists blazed with green energy. He closed in on Abaddon with terrifying speed, swinging his fists with enough force to shatter mountains. But Abaddon was unfazed. The demon god raised a single hand and effortlessly deflected the blow, as though swatting away a fly. The grin on Abaddon's face only widened as he retaliated with a devastating counterattack, a blast of dark energy aimed straight for Broly's chest. Broly, however, was no stranger to combat. With a swift twist of his body, he narrowly dodged the attack, the dark energy missing him by inches. In a blur of motion, Broly swung a powerful kick towards Abaddon's side. This time, the blow connected. The impact sent Abaddon hurtling through the sky like a speeding bullet, crashing into the ground below with enough force to send tremors through the land. Despite the damage, Abaddon merely chuckled, barely fazed by the attack. Impressive! Abaddon's voice boomed across the battlefield, filled with twisted delight. But you'll have to do better than that if you want to make me bleed, little Sen. Just then, Conic seized the opportunity to strike. With the precision and grace of an angel, he darted through the air, his hands moving faster than lightning. Divine energy crackled around his fists as he unleashed a rapid barrage of blows at Broly. Broly barely had time to react, raising his arms just in time to block the strikes. But each hit from Conic sent powerful shockwaves through Broly's body, forcing him to grit his teeth against the pain. The angel's power was far more refined than Broly's raw, untamed strength. With a defiant roar, Broly thrust his hands forward, unleashing a massive wave of emerald energy that forced Conic to retreat. The angel spun through the air, quickly catching himself and regaining his balance. But as he prepared for another strike, he felt a dark presence behind him. It was Abaddon. The demon god had reappeared, his twisted grin still plastered on his face. A dark blade of energy formed in his hand, crackling with malevolent power. Without a word, Abaddon slashed at Konik, aiming to cut him in half with a single, deadly stroke. Konik barely dodged the lethal strike, the dark blade whistling past him, cutting through the air just inches from his body. He quickly retaliated, summoning a brilliant flash of light as a divine barrier enveloped him, his form glowing with celestial energy. His eyes, now blazing with righteous fury, bore into his opponents with a fierce intensity. "You demon filth," Konik spat, his voice cold and unwavering, as if every word dripped with disgust. "Your very existence is an insult to all that is sacred. I will end you here and now." Abaddon only chuckled, the sound low and menacing, as dark energy swirled around him like a living storm. His crimson eyes gleamed with amusement, his smile twisted with malice. "Angels and their self-righteous speeches," he mocked, his tone dripping with scorn. "But tell me, Konik, how many of your oh-so-divine siblings have fallen to mortals like this one?" He gestured to Broly, who was already rising again, his emerald aura flaring back to life, burning hotter and more ferocious with each second. Konik's expression darkened at the mention of fallen angels, his fists tightening as he suppressed the rage building within. "Do not compare this sand to the likes of you," Konik shot back, his voice filled with disdain. "His power, though wild, comes from a will to protect. You demons," he practically spat the word, "only seek to destroy." For the first time, Abaddon's grin faltered, his eyes narrowing as a cold gleam flickered in their depth. "You angels," he hissed, his tone growing more sinister, "are blind to the truth. Destruction is not just inevitable, it is necessary, and I am its purest form." Before Konik could respond, a sudden roar split the sky like thunder. Broly, eyes wild and burning with unrelenting fury, charged forward again, his legendary Super Saiyan form surging with power. His fist, alight with emerald energy, streaked toward Konik with unstoppable force. The impact of the punch was deafening, the sheer force sending shockwaves through the air. Konik blocked it just in time, their fists colliding in an explosion of power that rippled across the already ruined battlefield. The ground beneath them shook violently as energy burst forth from their clash, spreading destruction in every direction. Konik gritted his teeth as he struggled against Broly's raw strength. The Saiyan's power was monstrous, untamed and overwhelming. Each of Broly's blows felt like a sledgehammer, pounding with incredible force. Broly's muscles bulged and strained as he pressed harder, his aura growing even more intense. His eyes glowed with an almost primal determination, his teeth gritted in fury. For a brief moment, he seemed to gain the upper hand, forcing Konik back. But even as Broly pushed forward with everything he had, his body was beginning to feel the strain of the battle. His energy, though vast, was not limitless, and with each strike, he was burning through his reserves. Every movement felt just a little slower, each punch a little heavier. Still, Broly fought on, unaware that despite his incredible power, he was still not on the same level as these godlike beings. His attacks became less precise, more wild and uncontrolled. Abaddon and Konik exchanged a glance, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Despite their fierce rivalry, they could both sense it. Broly's power was starting to wane. Though the Saiyan was immensely powerful, he was still not a true match for either of them. Not yet. But Broly didn't know that. His heart burned with a single, driving desire: to fight, to overpower, to win. As the battle raged on, the very fabric of the earth itself began to tear apart. Inside the protective dome, Bulma fought desperately to stabilize the planet's core. Her fingers flew over the console, typing in command after command, but nothing was working. The ground beneath her feet trembled violently, cracks spreading across the floor like spiderwebs. "We're running out of time," Bulma shouted, her voice tight with panic as sweat dripped down her forehead. She furiously continued typing, her mind racing for a solution. Nearby, Chile's face grew pale with fear as she watched the chaos unfold. "Bulma, what do we do? If we don't stabilize the core..." Bulma cut her off, her voice grim. "The planet will explode." She swallowed hard, trying to stay calm. "I know." Trunks and Goten stood guard at the entrance, their faces tense as they felt the violent tremors shaking the earth. Their expressions were grim, their eyes flickering between the battle raging outside and the crumbling ground beneath them. Earth itself was falling apart, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Then, a blaring alarm echoed through the dome, the sharp sound signaling what they had all feared. Earth's core was beyond saving. The planet had passed the point of no return, and now it was only a matter of time before everything was torn apart. Bulma's heart sank as she realized the inevitable. "We have to evacuate," she said, her voice heavy with resignation. "There's no saving Earth now." Without wasting another second, Bulma grabbed her daughter, Bulla, and bolted toward the ship docked in the lab. Trunks quickly followed, staying close to his mother and sister, his eyes scanning for any threats. Chi-Lai, Chi-Chi, and the others weren't far behind, each of them moving quickly and urgently as the ground beneath them continued to crack and break apart. Chi-Chi held Goten close, while Krillin rushed his daughter Marin towards safety. Videl and Pan sprinted after them, worry etched across their faces. As they boarded the ship, Bulma paused for a brief moment, her eyes lingering on the dome she had built with her own hands. She had poured years of her life into it, designing it to protect those she loved. Now, it was all about to be destroyed, reduced to rubble along with the rest of the planet. But there was no time for sentimentality. Earth was doomed, and their only hope lay in escape. The ship's engines roared to life, their powerful thrusters igniting with a loud hum as it shot off the ground. Within moments, the ship broke through the atmosphere, rocketing away from the crumbling planet below. Earth was tearing itself apart, cracks splitting across its surface like shattered glass. Chunks of land floated up, swirling in the chaos of the impending planetary collapse. But on the battlefield, Broly, Konik, and Abaddon were oblivious to the destruction, locked in a relentless, brutal battle. The air was thick with energy, crackling and sparking as the three titans clashed again and again, their attacks shaking the very heavens. Broly fought like a beast unleashed, his body driven by sheer rage and instinct. His emerald aura flared around him like a wildfire, and his blows landed with earth-shattering force. Yet the more he fought, the more he felt it, a creeping realization that was beginning to eat away at him. Despite his fury, despite the raw power coursing through his veins, it wasn't enough. He wasn't strong enough, not yet. With a final desperate roar that echoed across the battlefield, Broly pushed himself to his absolute limit, unleashing the full power of his legendary Super Saiyan form. His aura erupted in a dazzling explosion of light, burning brighter than it ever had before. His muscles bulged even further, veins throbbing with the immense energy rushing through his body. The ground beneath him cracked under the pressure of his transformation, but despite all this power, something was still missing. Abaddon sneered, watching Broly struggle with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Pathetic," he spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "You may have power, Sen, but you are nothing compared to a demon god." Broly's entire body trembled with the strain of his transformation, yet his spirit remained unbroken. His aura blazed even brighter, his muscles swelling with a last surge of energy. Every fiber of his being screamed in defiance, but Broly refused to give in. Deep within him, something stirred, something primal and ancient that was fighting its way to the surface. Abaddon, sensing Broly's internal struggle, grinned wickedly. He knew this battle was coming to an end. With a flicker of dark energy, he closed the distance between them in an instant. His twisted blade of dark energy aimed directly at Broly's heart. This would be the final blow. But just as the blade was about to strike, Broly let out a deafening roar, a roar so powerful it shook the very foundations of the battlefield. His aura exploded outward once again, but this time, it wasn't the familiar emerald hue of his legendary Super Saiyan form. Instead, it was a wild mix of gold and red, swirling around him like flames. Fiery energy crackled through the air, surrounding Broly in an almost untouchable aura. His hair lengthened, shifting to a deep crimson, and his once pale skin darkened, taking on a more primal, animalistic appearance. His eyes glowed with an intense, otherworldly light. In this moment, Broly had undergone yet another transformation, into the fearsome legendary Super Saiyan 4. Abaddon, who had been so confident just moments before, stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at Broly's new form. The raw power radiating off Broly was nothing like he had ever felt before. It wasn't godly in the traditional sense, but it was something far more terrifying, something wild and uncontrollable. Abaddon's stomach twisted with a sickening realization. Broly's power, now devoid of any divine ki, was completely immune to Abaddon's ability to siphon energy. This is impossible," Abaddon hissed, his voice filled with anger and frustration. "A mortal cannot achieve such power without divine ki. How can you have this kind of strength?" Broly's glowing eyes snapped to Abaddon, his lips curling into a feral snarl. There was something different about him now, something more controlled but just as fierce. Deep inside, Yamoshi's teachings echoed in Broly's mind. Lessons about harnessing his rage, using it as a tool rather than letting it consume him. Broly was no longer a mindless berserker, he had become something far more dangerous, a warrior with purpose, with focus. "You talk too much," Broly growled, his voice deep and guttural, almost animalistic. Without wasting another second, he lunged at Abaddon with blinding speed, his movement creating a shockwave that shattered the sky around them. Abaddon barely had time to react. Broly's fist crashed into his chest like a meteor, the impact so devastating that it sent the demon god flying backward, hurtling through the air. Abaddon slammed into the ground with an earth-shaking thud, the force of his landing creating a massive crater that swallowed mountains and valleys alike. Konik, who had been watching from a distance, floated in stunned silence. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Broly's transformation defied everything Konik knew about power in the universe. It wasn't just the raw strength that terrified him, it was the fact that Broly had tapped into something that didn't follow the established rules of divine and mortal power. This was something new, something that challenged the very balance of the universe itself. Konik hovered in mid-air, his eyes wide with shock as he watched Broly's power explode in a way that defied everything he thought he knew about mortals. How did a mortal reach this level? He muttered, his mind racing to make sense of it all. He had always viewed mortals as beneath the gods and angels, but these Saiyans, Broly, Goku, Vegeta, were different. They evolved and adapted in ways that broke the natural order, becoming stronger with each battle. Konik was beginning to realize that he could no longer afford to hold back, not against Broly. Broly landed on the ground with a deafening crash, the earth cracking beneath his feet as dust and debris flew into the air. His glowing crimson eyes were locked onto the massive crater where Abaddon had fallen. Broly's chest heaved with every breath, his animalistic form radiating raw, untamed power. He was ready to charge, to finish the demon god off once and for all. But before Broly could move, Konik descended from the sky, his divine aura flaring like a burning sun. The angel's expression was stern, his eyes narrowed with determination. With a flick of his wrist, Konik summoned a massive spear of pure energy, glowing with radiant light. He didn't hesitate. In one swift motion, he hurled the spear directly at Broly. The attack was lightning fast, too quick for even Broly to avoid. It struck him square in the chest, sending him skidding backward, his feet tearing trenches into the ground as he struggled to maintain his balance. Yet, despite the force of the impact, Broly barely flinched. He grunted, the pain hardly registering in his new form. His muscles tightened, his aura blazing brighter. With a growl, Broly raised his hand, and a swirling orb of green and red energy formed in his palm, glowing like a small sun. Konik's eyes hardened as he prepared for Broly's retaliation. Without a moment's pause, the angel shot forward, his body enveloped in divine light as he charged to meet Broly head-on. The battlefield shook with their clash. Broly's brute strength met Konik's precise, divine power. Each blow they exchanged sent shockwaves tearing through the air, the sheer force of their strikes ripping apart the already shattered land beneath them. Broly fought with a wild fury, his fists crashing down like hammers, each one capable of leveling mountains. But Konik countered with grace and speed, his movements fluid and deadly, slicing through the air like a blade of light. At one point, Broly let out a ferocious roar, his rage fueling him further. He unleashed a barrage of energy blasts, each one exploding with a power that could have obliterated entire cities. Konik darted through the attacks with astonishing speed, weaving between the blasts like a phantom, each explosion barely grazing him. Then, in an instant, Konik appeared in front of Broly, delivering a powerful kick to his side. The impact sent Broly crashing into a nearby mountain, the stone crumbling around him. But Broly wasn't down for long. The massive sand burst through the debris, his aura surging even higher as he charged back into the fight. His power was growing by the second, each moment only fueling his transformation further. Konik, still in disbelief, began to understand something terrifying. Broly wasn't weakening, he was getting stronger. "I have to end this now," Konik whispered to himself, his voice filled with grim resolve. His hands glowed with intense divine energy as he prepared to use his most powerful technique, a move capable of erasing Broly from existence entirely. But before Konik could act, the ground beneath them erupted in a violent explosion. Abaddon shot out of the crater like a meteor, his dark energy swirling around him in a furious storm. His crimson eyes blazed with unholy rage as he glared at Broly, his pride deeply wounded by the Sen's earlier attack. "You dare strike me, mortal!" Abaddon's voice thundered across the battlefield, shaking the very sky. His twisted face was contorted with fury, his demonic energy crackling like a storm around him. "You will regret this insolence." With a roar of fury, Abaddon unleashed a massive wave of dark energy. It surged across the battlefield like a tsunami, tearing through the ground and sending chunks of earth flying in every direction. The wave raced toward both Broly and Konik with terrifying speed, intent on obliterating everything in its path. Konik, acting quickly, summoned a divine barrier around himself, the golden light of his protection holding firm against the dark wave. Broly, on the other hand, didn't flinch. His glowing aura flared around him as he stood his ground, bracing for the impact. The wave crashed into Broly with the force of a freight train, the dark energy swirling violently around him. For a moment, it seemed like Broly would be swallowed whole by the destructive power. But then, with a deafening roar, Broly's aura exploded outward, shattering the wave of dark energy into pieces. The remnants of the attack scattered into the sky like shards of glass, vanishing into the air. Broly stood tall, his body glowing with the immense power of his legendary Super Saiyan 4 form. The force of his defiance sent shockwaves rippling across the battlefield, causing the already fractured earth to split open even further. But the battle was far from over. Abaddon and Konik launched themselves at Broly in unison, their auras blazing like twin infernos of divine and demonic power. They moved with blinding speed, determined to crush Broly from both sides. Broly, in his legendary Super Saiyan 4 form, let out a thunderous roar in response, his own fiery aura surging outward to meet their combined might. The sky above them seemed to tremble as their auras clashed violently, lighting up the heavens like fireworks made of pure destruction. The three titans collided once again, and the shockwave from their impact sent ripples of energy tearing through the planet and into the very atmosphere. Each punch and blast felt like a meteor crashing down, shaking the ground and sending chunks of earth flying into the sky. Explosions erupted everywhere, lighting up the world as if stars were being born and dying in a single instant. Entire continents crumbled beneath the weight of their power. The oceans boiled away into nothingness, and the once lush landscapes were reduced to wastelands. The sheer magnitude of their battle consumed everything in its path, leaving nothing untouched. High above the chaos, inside Bulma's ship, the Z fighters and their families watched in stunned silence. Their hearts were heavy with the realization that Earth was on the brink of destruction. They had managed to escape just in time, but the planet they had called home for so long was teetering on the edge of annihilation. Even though they believed in Goku, Vegeta, Broly, and the others, the uncertainty gnawed at them, leaving them feeling helpless. Trunks stood near the ship's observation window, staring down at the crumbling earth below. His face was grim, but his voice carried a quiet determination as he spoke. "We'll come back. We have to believe they'll find a way to fix this." His words hung in the air, filled with the hope that everything wasn't lost, that their world could still be saved. Yet, as the seconds ticked away, the countdown to Earth's destruction inched closer and closer to zero. There was no denying the gravity of the situation. The planet had less than 20 minutes before it would explode, and the brutal fight between Broly, Konik, and Abaddon showed no signs of slowing down. Each moment felt like a race against time, and the Z fighters could do nothing but wait, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Broly's power continued to surge. His body glowed with an intense, blinding light, his aura growing fiercer with each passing second. It was as if he was tapping into a limitless well of strength, a power that kept rising and rising, pushing him beyond his previous limits. Every punch he threw, every blast of energy he unleashed, felt stronger than the last. Broly could feel the tides of the battle beginning to turn. The once overwhelming forces of Konik and Abaddon were no longer as insurmountable as they had been. He could sense the shift. He was gaining the upper hand. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered as Broly, Konik, and Abaddon clashed again, sending shockwaves rippling out in all directions. The sheer force of their battle reached far beyond the planet, their energy echoing into the depths of space. But the clock was still ticking, and with each minute that passed, Earth drew closer to its final moment. The Z fighters, now far from the battlefield, watched in tense anticipation, their hearts filled with both hope and fear. They waited, praying that the outcome would bring salvation rather than ruin. Back on planet Yardrat, far from the chaos on Earth, Vegeta had collapsed outside his healing pod. His premature awakening had left him weakened, his body still not fully recovered from his injuries. Despite this, he stood tall, his breathing labored but his spirit unbroken. His fiery determination burned in his eyes, refusing to let weakness keep him down. The Yardratians surrounding him were left in shock, their eyes wide as they witnessed the sane prince defying the natural recovery process. The elder Yardrat approached him slowly, concern etched across his usually calm face. "Vegeta, you shouldn't be out of the pod," he said gently, his voice filled with worry. "Your body isn't ready yet, you need more time to heal." Vegeta, still panting heavily, glared at the elder with fierce determination. "I don't have the luxury of resting any longer," he growled through gritted teeth, his voice thick with urgency. "The Earth, Broly, Kakarot, and the others, they need me. I can feel it." His fists clenched tightly, trembling with the effort of standing despite his weakened state. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to rest, but Vegeta's pride and willpower refused to let him stay down. Vegeta's legs trembled beneath him, his muscles still aching and not yet fully restored, but he willed himself to stand tall. The pull of the battle raging on Earth was too strong to ignore. He could feel it. Broly's wild energy tearing through the planet, the overwhelming presence of powerful foes, and Earth itself weakening with every passing moment. It felt like the universe was on the verge of collapsing under the weight of these titanic clashes. Though Vegeta knew he wasn't at his full strength, his burning pride and the urge to protect his family were driving him forward. The elder Yardrat stepped closer, trying once more to dissuade him. "Vegeta, if you push yourself like this, you could," but Vegeta cut him off, his voice sharp and unyielding. "I don't have time for warnings. I need senzu beans. They're the only thing that can restore me in time." The elder Yardrat sighed deeply, seeing the fierce determination etched into Vegeta's face. There would be no reasoning with him. "Then you'll need to act quickly. Your friends on Earth are counting on you, and now, the entire universe may be counting on you." Vegeta closed his eyes for a moment, centering himself. He reached out with his senses, focusing on the distant energy signature of Korin's tower back on Earth. Summoning every ounce of strength left within his battered body, he gritted his teeth and, with a burst of energy, vanished from planet Yardrat in a flash of blue light, leaving the Yardratians staring after him in stunned silence. Vegeta reappeared at Korin's tower, materializing in a blur of light. He staggered briefly as he landed, his legs threatening to buckle beneath him from the strain of the long-distance teleportation. Korin, the wise and relaxed cat-like guardian of the tower, was lounging nearby with Yajirobe, both of them lost in their usual laid-back routine. The sudden appearance of the sane prince caught them off guard. "Vegeta!" Korin exclaimed, his wide eyes betraying his surprise. "You look like you just crawled out of a war zone. What happened to you?" Yajirobe, who had been lazily munching on some snacks, nearly choked when he saw Vegeta's beaten and exhausted form. "Whoa, Vegeta, you look like you've been hit by a truck," he blurted out, still holding a half-eaten piece of food in his hand. Vegeta's patience was already razor-thin, and Yajirobe's comment didn't help. He shot them both a fierce glare, his voice dripping with frustration. "I don't have time for idle chatter," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "I need a senzu bean, right now." Korin exchanged an awkward look with Yajirobe before scratching the back of his head sheepishly. Yeah, about that." Korin began hesitantly, his usual calm demeanor faltering. "There's only one left." Vegeta's scowl deepened, his anger simmering just below the surface. "What do you mean, only one left? How could you let that happen?" Yajirobe, now sweating nervously, shifted uncomfortably under Vegeta's piercing gaze. "Well, you see," he started, his voice shaky. I might have eaten the rest of them. I mean, those senzu beans are pretty great, right? I couldn't help it. They're like magic snacks." Vegeta's eyes narrowed dangerously, and for a brief moment, Yajirobe was convinced he was about to be vaporized on the spot. But instead, Vegeta extended his hand, his voice dark and menacing. "Give me the last one," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. Without another word, Korin tossed the final senzu bean to Vegeta. The sane prince caught it effortlessly, his movements still sharp despite his weakened state. Without hesitation, he popped the bean into his mouth, chewing quickly. Almost instantly, a surge of raw energy coursed through his body, like an electric shock rejuvenating every fiber of his being. His muscles tightened, his wounds closed, and his strength returned in full force. He clenched his fist, feeling the familiar power surge back into him as if he had never been weakened at all. The boost from the senzu bean was nothing short of miraculous. Every muscle in Vegeta's body tightened with new strength, his wounds healing instantly as though they'd never been there. His energy skyrocketed, surging higher than he could have imagined. The effects of the senzu bean combined with the powerful Zenkai boost, which had been building in his sane blood from his recent near-death experiences, brought him to new levels of power. The blue aura around him flared with crackling intensity, filling the air with a thunderous hum. Vegeta clenched his fist, feeling the raw energy coursing through him like a wild storm. His muscles pulsed with power, stronger than ever before. He could feel it. His strength had not only returned but had reached an entirely new peak. The Zenkai boost had pushed his power beyond its previous limits, and Vegeta reveled in it. Then, something extraordinary happened. The spike in Vegeta's energy was so immense that it rippled across the universe like a shockwave. Back on the crumbling battlefield, Broly, Kamek, and Abaddon were locked in their ferocious struggle, exchanging blows that shook the planet. Yet, in the midst of it, all three warriors froze as they felt the massive surge in power. Each of them turned their heads instinctively toward the source, eyes wide with recognition. Kamek's eyes widened with disbelief. He could feel the energy as clearly as if it were right beside him. "This power, it's not from a mortal," Kamek muttered, his voice laced with shock. "But it's not divine either, could it be?" But how did he escape from father? The confusion in his voice was evident, as he tried to piece together how such a power had emerged. Abaddon, his sinister grin fading, clenched his fists in frustration, the dark energy around him swirling more violently. Another mortal with power like this, he snarled, his voice filled with fury. What is it with this planet? God-level threats just keep popping up from nowhere. First Broly, and now this. The demon god's confidence wavered for the first time as he realized the magnitude of Vegeta's return. For Broly, however, the reaction was completely different. The moment he sensed the energy, his face broke into a broad, excited grin. His wild white eyes flickered with joy, and he let out a deep, satisfied laugh that echoed across the battlefield. It was a moment of clarity for him, a sign that things were about to shift in their favor. Vegeta, Broly muttered, his voice full of exhilaration and relief. He raised his head, gazing toward the sky as he felt the familiar energy pulsing through the atmosphere like a beacon of hope. His heart surged with confidence, and his own power responded in kind, blazing even brighter. Broly's grin widened further, his excitement unmistakable. Vegeta's back, he said with a low, determined growl. For the first time in what had felt like an endless barrage of battle, Broly felt a calm certainty wash over him. He knew what was coming next. Their reunion would change the course of this fight. With a newfound sense of strength, Broly steadied himself and prepared for what was to come. The gang's finally coming back together, he said, a spark of rage igniting in his eyes. That's it for this episode, guys. If you've watched to the end, then that may be an indication that you enjoy the episode, so please drop a like so the video could reach more people. See you in the next episode. Take care.